Did you know that long before Europe had mastered the movements of the stars, African societies were mapping the heavens with a precision that would make modern astronomers pause in wonder? If this sounds like the kind of history you wish you'd learned in school, then subscribe now, because we're uncovering the stories they never told us. Imagine standing in the heart of ancient Kush, where priests calculated the flooding of the Nile centuries in advance. Picture the stone circles of Nabta Playa in southern Egypt, erected 7,000 years ago, aligned perfectly with the summer solstice, predating Stonehenge by 1,000 years. These weren't accidents. These weren't lucky guesses. This was science. This was astronomy. This was Africa. For thousands of years, African societies developed calendar systems so sophisticated, so intricately woven into the fabric of their civilizations, that they governed everything from when to plant the first seed to when kings would be crowned, from predicting eclipses to scheduling the most sacred rituals. These calendars weren't just tools for counting days. They were living systems that connected the earth to the cosmos, the physical to the spiritual, the human to the divine. The Dogon people of Mali tracked the orbit of Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye, for centuries before Western astronomers discovered it with telescopes in the 19th century. They knew its 50-year orbital period. They understood it circled a larger star. They encoded this knowledge into their rituals, their art, their entire cosmology. How did they know? Through generations of careful observation, oral transmission, and a reverence for the sky that transformed stargazing into sacred science. In Ethiopia, the ancient GEEZ calendar still used today operates on a system so precise that it accounts for leap years differently than the Gregorian calendar, maintaining a unique relationship with solar cycles that stretches back millennia. 13 months structure the Ethiopian year, each carefully calibrated to agricultural seasons, religious festivals, and astronomical events. When the rest of the world celebrates New Year in January, Ethiopia celebrates Enkitataash in September, following rhythms set by ancestors who understood that time itself could be measured in multiple ways. The Akan people of Ghana developed a calendar based on a 42-day cycle that interlocked with a 7-day week, creating a complex system that governed market days, festivals, and agricultural activities. Every day had meaning. Every week had purpose. The calendar wasn't just tracking time, it was organizing an entire civilization's economic and spiritual life with mathematical elegance. But here's what they don't ask in history class. If African societies possessed this level of astronomical knowledge, this degree of mathematical sophistication, this depth of scientific inquiry, why are we still taught that civilization and enlightenment came to Africa from elsewhere? The answer isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Colonial narratives required Africa to be primitive, to be waiting for salvation, to be a blank slate upon which European superiority could be written. And so the calendars were dismissed. The stone circles were ignored. The astronomical knowledge was erased or attributed to outside influence, because to acknowledge African scientific achievement was to dismantle the very foundation of colonial justification. Consider the Barana calendar of Ethiopia and Kenya, a lunar stellar system so accurate that it loses only one day every 300 years. The Barana people, pastoralists often dismissed as simple herders, developed a timekeeping method that required understanding lunar phases, stellar movements, and solar years simultaneously. They appointed calendar keepers, trained from childhood, who would observe the sky, track patterns, and announce to the community when months would begin, when seasons would shift, when the rains would come. This wasn't folklore. This was meteorology. This was astronomy. This was precision. In southern Africa, the Zulu calendar organized time around cattle breeding cycles, agricultural seasons, and celestial observations, demonstrating that scientific knowledge doesn't always look like European science. It looks like survival. It looks like thriving. It looks like understanding your environment so deeply that you can predict its rhythms years in advance. The Igbo calendar of Nigeria, with its 4-day market week and 13-month year, coordinated the economic life of millions, ensuring that trade, festivals, and farming all moved in harmony. Market days rotated through villages, creating an economic network that connected communities across vast distances, all synchronized by a calendar system that required no written records yet functioned with perfect reliability for generations. What's heartbreaking is how much has been lost. When colonizers arrived, they didn't just take land and resources. They took time itself. They imposed the Gregorian calendar, outlawed traditional festivals, disrupted planting seasons, and severed the connection between communities and the cosmic rhythms they had followed for millennia. Knowledge keepers were silenced. Oral traditions were broken. Stone monuments were left to crumble. their purposes forgotten or deliberately obscured. But here's what survives. Here's what they couldn't take. In villages across Africa, elders still remember. Farmers still plant by signs their ancestors taught them. Communities still gather when the stars align in ways that calendars written in Geneva or London could never capture. The knowledge persists, not in museums or textbooks, but in the living practice of people who never forgot that their ancestors were scientists. The Mercy people of Ethiopia still use a lunar calendar so finely tuned to their environment that it predicts rainfall patterns with accuracy that meteorologists with satellites struggle to match. The Nuer people of South Sudan organize their entire year around cattle migrations and river levels, a calendar written not on paper but in the landscape itself, requiring an understanding of ecology that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. These weren't primitive people marking time with crude tools. These were civilizations that understood something profound. That time is not linear, not universal, not the same for everyone. Time is local. Time is seasonal. Time is connected to place, to land, to sky, to the rhythms of life itself. And African societies mastered this understanding in ways that the rigid, mechanistic calendars of Europe never could. The stone circles at Namratunga in Kenya, aligned with 7 stars used by the Cushitic people for calendar calculation 300 years ago, still stand as testimony. The Ishango bone from the Democratic Republic of Congo, 20,000 years old, marked with what may be one of humanity's earliest mathematical calculations, possibly a lunar calendar, whispers of a scientific tradition so ancient it predates written history itself. This is Africa's legacy. Not poverty. Not primitivism. Not a continent waiting to be civilized. But a continent of astronomers and mathematicians, of careful observers and brilliant innovators, of societies that looked at the chaos of existence and found patterns, found order, found meaning written in the stars. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not just that this history was suppressed, but that it continues to be marginalized, footnoted, questioned in ways that Greek or Roman or Chinese scientific achievements never are. African knowledge must constantly prove itself worthy of being called knowledge at all, must fight for recognition in a world that still struggles to see Africa as anything other than what colonialism made it appear to be. But the truth doesn't need permission to be true. The calendars existed. The observations were made. The calculations were correct. African societies tracked time with a sophistication that rivaled any civilization on Earth, and they did it not despite their Africanness, but because of it, because they were connected to their environment in ways that produced not just survival but science, not just tradition but innovation. So the next time someone asks what Africa contributed to human civilization, remember this. Remember Napta Playa. Remember the Dogon and Sirius. Remember the Barana calendar keepers. Remember that for thousands of years, African people looked up at the same sky we see today and understood it, mapped it, made it make sense, and built entire civilizations on that understanding. The stars remember, even when the history books forget. And now, so do you.